Hello, Internet, and welcome to episode 242 of the Comic Watchers Show. He's Chad, I'm Matt, we're the Comic Watchers, and this is our show. So this week, we have the one and only legendary Christopher Priest here with us to talk about Vampirella and whatever else he feels like talking about. So, Christopher, welcome.
Hey, thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, I'm going to let Chad take the reins and run with our first question this week because he set all this up and is raring to go.
Yes, I'm raring to go.
Yeah, that's how we say it in Oklahoma.
Well, before we get into the talking Vampirella or whatever, tell us a little bit about your your origin as a comic book reader and creator.
Well, as a reader, I was 8 years old, and I had the measles or the mumps or one of those childhood diseases, and I was laid up in bed for a few days. And my mom went to the drugstore to pick up a prescription. And while she was there, she thought she would get something for me to distract me or to occupy my time. And they had spinner racks in stores in those days. In those days, comics were a mass market item. They weren't just a direct market item. And so there was an impulse buy. And she saw this issue of Jimmy Olsen where all I remember is that Jimmy was a pirate for some reason. I need to look that issue up and find out what issue that was. And she brought home this Jimmy, Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, and Jimmy was he's dressed up like a pirate, and that was the first comic book that I recall reading, and I just got hooked on that. And then I think 3 or 4 years later, Mom stupidly did it again. There was a news piece that she read in the Times about an issue of Marvel that was being released without the Comics Code approval. And it dealt with drug addiction. And I think Peter Parker's best friend, Harry Osborn, was on drugs, and there was the Green Goblin, was all this stuff going on. And Mom brought that one home because she thought it had a strong anti-drug message. So she brought that one home for me. And I got to tell you, that just blew my mind. Because DC was very escapist. And it was kind of, I guess, written to a different age group, while Marvel was more reality-based and it was kind of more adult or more grown-up. And it just, Spider-Man just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, this is so interesting. And then I became this Marvel head. So in high school, I went to a vocational high school in New York City, and in those days, New York City had an internship program that worked with, I guess, gifted children or whatever. And through the internship program, I applied to, I think, 4 or 5 law firms because my mother wanted me to be a lawyer. And she was right. I should have been a lawyer. So I applied to 4 or 5 law firms and Marvel Comics. I saw Marvel Comics on the list. I went, this can't be right. And I went, okay, Marvel Comics. Then I blew off all of the interviews for the law firms because I was dating some girl in South Ozone Park, and it's a long story. And I was, you're 16, you're running you're running back and forth. But I kept the one for Marvel Comics, and I just didn't have a hope in the world of actually getting the internship. When I arrived there were like 4 or 5 other teenagers there. They were all artists. They had their portfolios. I was the only writer. And then this very tall gentleman named Jim Shooter emerged from the office. He was the tallest white guy I'd ever seen in my life. And Jim interviewed all of us. And a few days later, just by the grace of God, I got the call. And I became, in 1978, I became this, mascot, gopher that would go and make the Xeroxes and fetch coffee and run errands. And, I was, Stan Lee's, intern. And I got to work with a lot of good people, a lot of legendary people. We use that word now. Legendary is, kind of code for, we really respect their body of work, but we're not hiring them anymore. That's what legendary means.
Way to go, Matt.
Yeah.
You called him legendary.
It means
in your intro.
Yeah, yeah. Legendary is like,
Well,
it's like
okay.
it's almost like a curse. It's like the gold watch of comics. It's like, we now call him legendary. He comes up to the office and everybody wants to take selfies with him, but nobody's hiring me to write the Flash or Daredevil. And I don't really know why. I'm still quite capable of writing the Flash or Daredevil, but I'm legendary now. So at any rate, that's how I got my foot in the door, and after the internship, I started doing some freelance proofreading and some little goofy scut work around the office. I eventually got hired by a guy named Paul Lakin to mind the store for. He was running Crazy Magazine, and I was taking care of the office while he was not there. And I would come over after school, and I would just, whatever tasks were left to do, he would leave me notes, whatever, and I would run the boards, the art boards, over to the printer, or pick stuff up, or go back and forth, or basically just keep the office running. And I got paid $50 a month for that. And then eventually, Paul Lakin was replaced by a man named Larry Hama. Larry Hama came in, and he was running Crazy Magazine, and I became his flunky. And at some point, he just turns to me and says, "By the way, how much are they paying you?" And I said, "Well, they pay me $50 a month." And he goes in to see Shoot and goes, "We're going to get sued. We can't. This little black kid, you can't do that. That's close to it. You got to do something." So he goes in, and Shooter found some money in the budget to actually bring me on staff. And I think that was 1979 when I officially became an assistant editor at Marvel, and I thought I'd work there until the Crazy Magazine got canceled, and then I'd go on to college and I would become a lawyer like my mother wanted me to. And that was 45 years ago. So there you go.
Not a bad little origin story. And I know you were doing editing duties for a few years, but correct me if I'm wrong, your first big break as a writer anyway was the Falcon miniseries, right?
Well, yeah, it wasn't a miniseries. In those days, Jim Shooter and the other editors at Marvel, they would be acquiring what we call inventory stories. And what an inventory story, it's a story that we may never publish, or we may never publish anytime soon, but it's there in case the regular team misses their deadlines. And we have a story that's written and drawn, it's in the drawer, and we could just slot it into production and make that deadline. So Jim was training several of us, Kurt Busiek and Len Kaminsky. There was a couple of us that were coming in and writing these inventory stories, and we were getting our foot in the door and getting our training from Jim. And Jim would just like, no, and he'd mark up the script and make us go and do 8 and 9 rewrites and things like that. So the Falcon story was one of those inventory stories, and he gave it as a tryout to a new guy that just walked through the door, named Paul. Oh wow, how could I forget his name? Oh man, really famous artist. Sorry, Paul, I forgot your name. I forgot your last name. It'll come back.
Smith?
Huh?
Was it Paul Smith?
Paul Smith. There we go. Thank you. To a guy named Paul Smith, and this was Paul Smith's first work for Marvel. So the boards come in, and everybody's going ooh ah, and they're making multiple copies, and they're flooding the zone. All the editors with Paul Smith's pages going, look, this guy is amazing. We got to hire this guy. Except these boards were not lettered, so they couldn't read the story. They just looked at the art. So Paul got picked up. He became like the first round draft pick, but I did not. So the Falcon story kind of languished around, but Paul Smith got gobbled up by, I don't know, X-Men or Banana Man or whatever he was drawing at the time. So Jim came back to me and said, look, how would you like to just take that story, expand on it, and finish it up as a 4-issue miniseries? So he reached out to another trainee, another new guy on the block named Mark Bright. And Mark Bright took the reins from that point, and he did issues 2, 3, and 4. And once it was completed, they released it as a miniseries, and that became my first published work. I had a bunch of stories that had been written and drawn and were, sitting in a flat file somewhere that eventually ended up in. They would do these collections for Walmart, like bagged comics or like a big giant size special thing that was just, it was like a retailer exclusive. And that's what Jim would do with how he would burn off a lot of this inventory. What he would put in these unspecified, Marvel Holiday Edition, or something like that, to get rid of it. But the Falcon thing was the first thing that really had my name on it. That was that was put out there, and it was by Paul Smith. I'm really embarrassed that I forgot his last name. Sorry, Paul.
And here we are all these years later, and you are Dynamite's Man of the Hour for Vampirella. So
and legendary Man of the Hour, yes.
Hey, yeah, well, you said it this time, not me. So tell us a little bit about what you got cooking for Vampy.
Well, this is like a 2-stage rocket, like the Apollo thing where, okay, so, to talk about the near future, about what's happening right now, and then talk about what's about to happen. So we just renumbered the book to allegedly catch up to where the numbering would be if the book had been published continuously for the last 50 years. So Dynamite put out issue number 666. And that led off this whole storyline that was kind of a Groundhog's Day storyline where she kept having the same day over and over again, and she kept getting killed, and then she'd wake up and and I think it was a nightmare and live the day over and get killed, and and it was a real fun story. So we just did that with issue 666, and the gist of that story was that at the end of my initial Vampirella run. We ended the run with issue 25 of my volume. I think it was volume 5 of Vampirella. And Vampirella married a guy who may or may not have been Dracula. Long story short, he may or may not have been Dracula. He was a carrier of what we call the Dracula virus. So he could have become Dracula at any particular moment. And she actually married him to as part of a ritual to negate this Dracula virus and save him from that fate. But she did really love this guy, and as a result of that union, well, at some point she found out she was pregnant. So then we had this whole pregnancy story where we did Vampirella year 1, and Vampirella year 1 is it kind of goes back into her origins on Draculon and her life as a child and the whole deal like that. But the story is being narrated by Vampirella in a undisclosed location where she's pregnant, and she's telling the story of how she came to Earth. She's telling that story to her unborn child. So she's big as a house, and she's talking to the baby in her stomach and telling the story. That's the gimmick of Vampirella year 1. At the end of that story, she goes into labor and she ends up having the child. The child gets stolen out of the nursery. The newborn baby gets stolen by these fanatics, and the baby ends up presumed dead. And she assumes that her child was dead. So then she goes off to wreak havoc and revenge herself against these people who stole her baby. And that was our Vampirella Rage series. So that was 6 issues of her being like the bad guy. Now she's, instead of being the good guy or the good, the person who is hunting the vampires, now she's the shark. She is the threat. She is the danger, And at the end of that particular series, we revealed that the baby did not, in fact, die, but that the baby had been stolen by her evil twin sister, Draculina. And that Draculina had stole this baby and so forth. And we go through all this stuff with Draculina. So where we are now is at the end of this whole 666 storyline. She manages to beat Draculina at her own game. And Vampirella finally gets her baby back. And that's when things go completely to hell. Because she has the baby, but has not bonded with the baby, doesn't know what to do with the baby. Anyone who's ever had a baby can appreciate the enormity, like the atom bomb a baby drops into your life, a newborn baby, particularly if it's your first, and you really don't know what to expect. You really don't understand, oh my God, I don't have any children. I had a niece who my sister, thank you, sister, brought home into our lives. And it was just when I was home alone with the baby, and sometimes the baby's crying, And those of you who have children, you'll know what I'm talking about. You know, sometimes the baby's crying and you're going crazy trying to figure out why. Okay, is she hungry? Okay, no, she's not hungry. Okay, is it gas? So you try to burp the baby. No, it's not gas. Okay, so then you check under the hood. Is she leaking under there? You know, no, she doesn't need a diaper change. She doesn't need a, she's not hungry, doesn't need a diaper change. She doesn't have gas. Why is she crying? And now you're starting to panic. Okay, all right, because you figure like, well, you know, what if there's something wrong with this kid? You know, and yeah, do I call 911? Do I take it to the emergency? You know, so Vampirella finally gets her baby back, but it ends up being a completely unsettling experience where she really doesn't know what to do. Put a pin in that. Okay. Meanwhile, Draculina, having been defeated by Vampirella, ends up being chased into what we call the dark world. And the dark world is an astral plane. It is something between life and death. It is a black and white void where the Warren, you know, magazine run of Vampirella, where all that lives. All the black and white stories happen in the dark world. So Draculina is in the dark world, and she's trapped in there, and the dark world is trying to kill her. And that's what's happening right now. Like if you go down to your local comic shop now and you pick up Vampirella, we're right in the middle of that Draculina story where she is in the dark world. And she's trying to figure out why the dark world is trying to kill her. And as it turns out, the dark world is trying to kill her because she is depressed and borderline suicidal because she lost because Vampirella took her baby back. Draculina had bonded with the baby, had become one with the baby, had, you know, just loved this infant, and it was the one ray of light into Draculina's otherwise very, very dark life, because she's bad. She's very, very bad, you know, and this baby just really just, you know, lit her up, and it's been ripped away from her exactly the way she ripped it away from Vampirella. So now she's experiencing basically what Vampirella experienced. So, you know, when you enter the astral plane responds to whatever your emotions are, whatever's going on with you, that kind of thing. So that's why the dark world is trying to kill her. And she has to basically find a way to escape this dark world that she's in and that she basically created for herself before the dark world kills her. So that's what's happening right now. And you know, then we have cutaways to what Vampirella is doing, obviously. You know, but once we emerge from the Draculina Dark World story, I think that'll be 675. We rejoin Vampirella, and we see the baby is driving her completely insane, which will set off a whole sequence of events where her postpartum depression just sends her down a very dark road that ultimately causes an alien invasion of the planet. So we're going to a big scale. We're going to be playing the big room later on this year, you know, early in 2025. And that's basically, you know, and I'm sorry, I might have confused the hell out of everybody, but that's what's going on in Vampirella, you know, at the moment. You know, I really like the character because it's you know, for years and years, and all due respect to writers who make way more money than I do, a lot of writers were just working the costume. They were like, okay, you know, hot babe in a skimpy outfit, you know, she bites your neck, let's go. And as a result, there's been all this uncharted, like, there's so much you can do with this character, because Vampirella is just a young woman trying to make it on her own in the big city. She just happens to be a vampire from outer space. Okay. But other than that, she's just like anybody else trying to, and she wants what we all want. She wants community. She wants love. She wants purpose. She wants, these types of things. But it's kind of like you two are probably too young to remember Casper the Friendly Ghost, but Casper the Friendly Ghost, he wanted these things. He wanted community. He wanted friends. He wanted love, but he just happened to be a dead baby, and people would befriend him until they discovered that, oh no, you're a dead baby. He's a ghost, and they run away. And so that's kind of how Vampirella works, where she just, it's about this culture of young people, of Generation Z or whatever generation she happens to be part of. And she just happens to have this meddlesome mother and this set of fangs and this bloodlust that she has to deal with. But there's so much uncharted territory with the character. There's so many places to go, and we've just scratched the surface. So, once we get past the dark world and then we get into the postpartum story, that just snowballs into, basically an alien invasion of Earth. There's just tons more places to go even after that.
Do you ever worry that as a man writing about things like postpartum depression, there might be a sense of imposter syndrome or anything similar?
Gosh, I hope not. I really feel like a lot of that is kind of a contemporary phenomenon, and me being such a dinosaur and sort of disconnected from social media and so forth. I don't dwell on things like that. I really think a writer writes. I think a writer writes what he or she or they are knowledgeable of, and there's an expression, write what you know.
Sure.
And that really just means, like, you have to delve into your research and know what you're talking about. But gosh, I really hope not. I really hope that people aren't like, going to this dark place where they go, well, we don't want to read this book. We don't want to read Wonder Woman because Tom King's writing it because he's amazing.
Right.
And I'm going, come on, Tom King's an amazing writer. What are you missing? Now, conversely, I really don't get it why, at least with the majors, I don't see a lot of women writing, Iron Man or Batman or something. Why are they often directed toward female characters or and for a while back in the early aughts, back in the New 52 and that era, whatever they were doing at Marvel and at DC, for a while there, they weren't hiring writers so much as they were casting writers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had a book about like an Asian an Asian lesbian samurai, you had to be a female Asian lesbian samurai in order to write it. So I would only be offered Black characters and
Right.
the other people, and I kept turning jobs down, which is why you didn't see a lot of me, during those years. I hope we've outgrown that. I hope we've gotten to the point where I would like to be as invisible as possible, and not have my gender or race or religion or anything else or my politics, whatever you think my politics
Right.
might be, to be kind of, stamped onto the page. I'm not trying to make a statement or take a job from somebody else. If there's a female vampire out there that wants to write Vampirella, there's a lot of opportunity at Dynamite. They do a lot of Vampirella books. There's a lot of different Vampirella universes to plug into. But I really hope that people will just kind of enjoy the book for what it is and not get so, into the culture war stuff.
Right. In other words, let the work speak for itself.
In the name of God, yes, I hope so. Yes.
Chad.
So, what was your first exposure to the Vampirella character? Because I think this is the first time I've actually read any Vampirella. Preparing for this interview, but I remember Wizard back in the days she was plastered all over the place.
Bad girls in the 90s, baby.
Yeah, well, I'm sure back in the 70s, I bought Vampirella, I bought Eerie. Archie Goodwin was writing a lot of that, and Steve Skates, who you may or may not remember, who was writing a lot of that.
Yeah, big DC guy.
Yeah. So I was exposed to it like way back then. The first time writing it was for Harris, when Harris had the thing. David Bogart, who ironically is now like an executive at Marvel, called me up and asked me to do Vampirella, and I don't know, every time someone asked me to do Vampirella, I would just go, what? It's just, because I'm a Marvel and DC guy. I want to write the Flash and Iron Man and, Plastic Man, whatever, so it was, I ended up writing a few Vampirella things, where I had to kind of dive into the character and realize that the pool was very shallow and I would just smack my head against the concrete bottom pretty quickly. So you don't want to dive into the Vampirella. You want to kind of just dip your toe into the wading pool and realize that not a lot had been done with her in terms of an internal investigation of who this character is as a person, and stop just, objectifying her, I guess, is the point that I'm trying to make. So for Dynamite, I had the publisher of Dynamite drive 5 hours from his house to track me down at a convention, because he'd been emailing me, he'd been calling, and I just kept putting him off. And I go, well, we'll talk about it Monday. I'll gladly pay you Tuesday. And we just kept, and I'm at this convention, and I turn around, and here's Nick Marucci, and I'm like, Jesus, will you give it a rest already with this Vampirella thing? So but Nick, he impressed me a couple of ways. One is I said, look, I am a reasonably devout Christian and former pastor, and I would have a big problem. I don't really like comic books that make the devil, make a hero out of the devil, like Son of Satan, and he's got a cape and he's got the big pentagram on his chest, and he's the good guy, he's the hero, or making a hero out of Dracula or something like that. Because in comic books, you can write about the devil all day long, but as soon as I write about God, it makes everybody nervous. Go out and find Deathstroke issue number 20, my Deathstroke issue number 20. I don't know what volume it is. It's the Rebirth Deathstroke.
Mm-hmm.
That's an issue where I wrote the entire issue in captions from the King James Bible. And in this story, Deathstroke is he's trying to build his own version of the Teen Titans. I can do better than that. I'll show you. So he's putting together his own little team of Teen Titans, and he goes to recruit the Black Power Girl, the teenage Power Girl, Tanya. And Tanya, as I wrote her as a born-again Christian. So he has to go and convince her to join his team. And he does that by using the Bible against her. So he goes to her house and he starts quoting scripture to her, and it really irritates her. And he goes, "You're Deathstroke. Don't quote scripture to me." And he's like, "Well, you have to forgive me." And she goes, "Why?" I said, "Because you're a Christian. That's what makes you born-again people so much fun." It's like, as soon as someone apologizes, and it's true, if you're really a Christian, the minute someone apologizes to you, Chad, the minute someone apologizes to you, you have to forgive them. That's the rule. Because if you don't, then you're not a Christian. And if you don't forgive them, then God doesn't forgive you. So, I have Deathstroke using the Bible against this young lady, to like twist her into joining his group. And then the villain of the piece is this mutated guy, who's kind of an Incredible Hulk guy, and he's a born-again Christian. So he's a born-again Christian, but he's also a villain, and he's also a homosexual, but he's a devout Christian who loves God, and yet he's going to crush his enemies at the same time. So it was a really fun exploration of these things. And I thought that DC was going to I was just waiting for the phone call. I said, yeah, this script is going to come flying back at me, but the damn thing is in print. And I was actually really impressed that Dan DiDio and Bob Harris signed off on it and were brave enough to let me write about God, because a lot of times I can't write about God. So with Vampirella, I said, look, Nick, tell you what, I can write about this occult. Well, first of all, I don't think Vampirella is a cult, but that's another thing. But I can write about this occult stuff. I can write about the devil if you allow me to write about God. And without hesitation, he said, "Go for it." He's just not afraid. So there's a lot of theology in Vampirella where I'm just, laying it on with a trowel. And a lot of people don't realize that because all they see is the skimpy costume and the big boobs and the whole deal. And I understand that, I get it, but if you look at, I think in issue 4 or 5, there's a sequence there where she's going to murder these nuns. Trust me, they deserved it. So she's going to murder these nuns, and she meets Father Gutierrez, and Gutierrez is trying to talk her out of it, trying to talk her down off the ledge, and he's talking about, and she says, well, live by the sword, die by the sword. And he says, look, this is what people don't get about that scripture. That scripture is not about pacifism. I don't think that Jesus was necessarily a pacifist. It was the culture of violence that Jesus was against. Jesus knew his guy had a weapon. He knew he had a sword. You can't hide a sword. So he didn't preach about him carrying a sword or don't bring the sword. He never told him don't bring the sword. It's just like, don't make that culture of violence a lifestyle, to be kingdom minded, turn the other cheek. That's not about pacifism. That's about not taking revenge. That's about, loving your neighbor, returning love for hate, so forth like that. So there's a lot of that in Vampirella, which people don't see, or because they don't read the book, because they see the cover and she's not wearing much and she has big breasts. So, but, Nick allowed me to kind of like really go in there. And it's not like DC and Marvel, where DC and Marvel have very strong ground rules. They have these corporate parents. The studios are very hands-on these days. It's really difficult these days, and they have these deeply entrenched Bibles and so forth. But at Dynamite, I really got a blank slate, to go in and say, I can create my own vision for this character, which does not negate anyone else's vision, because there's a whole vampy verse. There's a whole, just like the Spider Verse, all these different interpretations of the character. This one's mine, and I get to write those rules, and I get to design what I want to do. So it's been a very liberating journey, and a real challenge to go in and say, okay, here's a character that's been around for 50 years, and no one has bothered to really delve into, just one example. There was I think this was issue 4 as well. There was a helicopter crash. That must be issue 3. There was a helicopter crash, and she's having lunch with her friends, and one of her friends says, well, I guess you could go, rescue those pilots. And she goes, well, I'm sure first responders will get to them. And he goes, what first responders? They're in the middle of nowhere, and you could go get those pilots, or do vampires not do search and rescue? So it's just like, let's explore, if this was an actual character, if this was a real person living on the world as we know it, what would the challenges be, ethical, and moral, and what would these circumstances be? And I don't know that a lot's been done there, So I just say that, like, this is just, to me, completely uncharted territory and just a wide open space to create. And thank you, Nick Barucci, for giving me the space to do it.
I'd like to step back just for a second to the theological aspects of what you were just talking about, because I found that really fascinating. Because Vampirella, as you stated, not so much a horror character, and I assume I can infer that because of her space roots on the vampire planet, you consider as a little bit more of a sci-fi character. How do you interplay that world with God, either capital G or lowercase g?
Well, for starters, I don't make God a comic book character, because I think that I want everybody to be able to read Vampirella. I want, left-leaning people to read it. I want right-leaning people to be able to read it, and everyone in between. So I don't want to negate anybody's particular belief system. I do not believe that Ackerman, the creator of Vampirella, ever intended this to be a book about the occult. It was borderline satire, when he created her. And it was clearly, I want to say science fiction, but it was too ridiculous to be science fiction. I mean, science fiction is supposed to be logical and have some basis in reality and in fact. And everything that Ackerman did was just Forrest Ackerman was just way over the top. But my stance is to bring Vampirella back to the realm of science fiction, and the occult aspects of it tend to pan out as just scientific phenomena that we can't quite explain. So yes, there are demons that show up in my book, but there's always a question of like, is this creature actually a demon, or is this creature just like some interdimensional person that or interdimensional phenomenon that we can't quite explain?
Sure.
So that's kind of how I back into that. But meanwhile, what I like to do, whether it's Vampirella or Superman or Spider-Man, is I want to write the world and write people as they actually are. And what I mean by that is like I don't know that I would ever write a Christian novel. I have a novel. I have a bunch of novels on the Kindle platform on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is called Zion. And Zion is a problematic novel because my agent shopped it around, and it's too Christian for the secular market, and it's too secular for the Christian market because it deals with like it deals basically with the black church, and you're meeting a bunch of pastors who behave like mob bosses. So they're in the pulpit on Sunday preaching, righteousness in heaven and all that other stuff. But they're settling their differences with tire irons in the middle of the night, down by the shore, and so the Christian market, they're like, but these people are behaving badly and they're cussing. And I'm like, yeah, but see, I'm a pastor. I know these people. This is what they do. Okay. This is what they do. This is, once you get that ordination thing and they let you in the pastors club, you get into the back room and you see all the bullshit, that these guys do. And I put that in that book called Zion, and it's funny and it's poignant and it's kind of an eye opener. But again, the secular market doesn't want to touch it because it's got all this Christian stuff in it, and it really, proselytizes a belief in the Christian myth, and the Christian market, they want everything sanitized, no cussing, no sex, no thing, So when I get criticized about, Vampirella, my response always is that, I really think that part of the problem with modern Christianity is the impulse to withdraw from the world as it actually is and to not acknowledge the world as it actually is, which does not give me an opportunity to present any sort of relevant position on spirituality in a way that would objectively stand out. So like in our Vampirella story, she has an affair. She picks up this well, she actually kind of gets picked up by this Uber driver named Victory, and the two ladies, they become romantically entangled. Well, for Victory, it's romantic. For Vampirella, it's just recreational, and it's one of those things where, like, these two have coupled up, but one of them wants it to be more than the other one does, and eventually Victory becomes kind of obsessive and so forth. And anyway, Vampirella breaks up with her, breaks Victory's heart, leaves Victory alone. So Victory now she's turning into Glenn Close. She wants to boil her bunny and the whole deal here. And Vampirella's mother, who's like this meddling sort of, she's like Endora from Bewitched, like the Agnes Moorehead character from Bewitched. So Vampirella's mother finds Victory, the brokenhearted ex, and gives her these superpowers and turns her into like this agent and she's working for Vampirella's mother. And part of that is Vampirella's mother puts Victory undercover at this Christian school. And it's like this Christian college, like Jerry Falwell's university. And Victory is working in the office, and she's secretly working for Vampirella's mother and doing all the schemy stuff. But what happens is, as a result of her spending so much time around these people, it starts to rub off on her. And at some point, Victory has like this heartbreaking experience where she just ends up hitting rock bottom personally in her life, and she has nowhere left to turn but to the cross. And she's at this Christian school, and she as a result, she finds Christ and she accepts Christ as her savior, which is where I was going with the victory character all along. So now she's like this. She's not a vampire, but she has like these powers that come from occult sources. Let's put it that way. But she's also a born again Christian, and for the longest time, she was trying to hide this change that has happened in her life because she doesn't want the other vampires to discover that she's become, this person. She's become, this child of God. So it's this conflict that's in there that I thought was really, and that was happening in Sacred Six, the spin-off book from Vampirella called Sacred Six, and that's the kind of stuff that I think that where I can credibly present, or use this as a platform, to credibly present, a perspective on spirituality and Christianity, as opposed to, if we were going to do, the three of us, we were going to do a Christian comic, and now we have to sanitize everything and present a completely unrealistic, view of the world, that doesn't prepare anyone to actually live in it. So that's kind of how, that's kind of my perspective on the whole, spirituality versus, Superman stuff.
I got you. So when you say that the character or whomever is not being taught to meet the world on its own terms, do you think that kind of can result in a quote unquote angry Christian or lost Christian or something of that nature?
I never think that way, because I think that most Christians are just not going to read my work at all. Because all of the Dynamite stuff, it just, when you look at the covers, it's got like, it's got large breasts and demons. So they're probably not picking us up. Now when you go over to the superhero aspect of things, maybe not. I think there's kind of a mixed bag about, but a lot of churches used to preach against comic books because at some point DC allowed Robin to say the word damn, and I remember, specifically picking up, like, this is like the 80s. This was, it wasn't Marv Wolfman. It was somebody else, whose name is on the tip of my tongue, and I can't bring it back right now, but very popular Batman writer, and I was reading, I think this might have been the first Robin solo series, and I'm reading this comic, and it's like 1989, 1990, something like that. And at some point he said the word damn, and I remember calling somebody at DC and saying, well, we just lost them, because we want kids to read comics, but kids don't buy comics because kids don't have any money. Who buys comics for kids? The parents buy the comics for kids. And soon as like Ma and Pa, America, see, Robin with the potty mouth, they're not buying that for their kids anymore, and then we've gone completely beyond that, where we just kind of followed the kids out of grade school into high school, out of high school into college. And now our average readership is in their 30s, and we've completely lost the next the successive generations. So, yeah, I don't think that, I hope that there's nothing in my work that would lead a Christian astray. If anything, I hope it's the other thing where I go, well, where they go, wow, we never really thought of it like that. And maybe, some lapsed Christians might actually go, maybe I should, go back to church or open a Bible at some point, maybe I should, kind of turn back to it. At least, and maybe that's just self-delusion, but I do think that a lot of Christian universities, a lot of churches, a lot of organized religion are not dealing with the real world, which is always a mistake. Jesus, if you read your Bible, Jesus was a guy who never went more than 200 miles from his house. He was a guy that hung out with hookers and tax collectors and, and drunkards and stuff. He was a guy that dealt with the world as it actually was and didn't try to just sanitize it. He was talking about, changing yourself by a renewing of your mind, and what he meant by that is by thinking about things and approaching things in what we call a kingdom mindset, where we, conform ourselves not to the world, but to, the kingdom. We don't try to transform. What you're seeing now is a lot of, Christians trying to force feed Christianity and force feed the 10 Commandments on people and force the world to be, more Christ-like. That's not what they missed the point of Jesus altogether, where he wasn't really that concerned about this world. He was talking about, being kingdom minded and about, transforming yourself by the renewing of your mind and by, looking forward to the next world, and not necessarily trying to fix this one. There's nothing. There is no model in the Bible for Jesus, holding some protest or backing some political candidate, or or forcing people to think his way, holding a gun to their head that you must think this way. Ballot initiatives, there is no a model for that, and the rest of that is just like organized religion trying to put one over on us, and that usually ends up failing at some point because they're creating this sort of artificial sweetener, to lighten up reality. And then when some of these kids, when they graduate the Christian college, or when they move away to a new town and they no longer have the cover of that church or whatever that environment they were in, when they have to deal with the real world on its own terms, they're not prepared for it, and they just kind of wow, that's really shocking. So I'm kind of ready to take those that criticism. I realized that was going to be an occupational hazard for writing Vampirella. But yeah, it's just, art should be art. We should not be putting a bra on the Venus de Milo. We should not be, saying like, okay, well, we can't do this kind of art because we're Christian, or we can't do that kind of art because we're Christian. It's like, well, this is art. This is ministry. This other thing is ministry. I'll let those chips fall. I mean, there's a lot of chips to fall for me. I got the the feminist thing. I got the race thing. I got the the political thing. There's a lot of chips.
And yet you're still standing.
Yeah. Well, for now, but I'm legendary, so I don't know how much longer. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Man, that just keeps coming back to bite me.
No, I'm not trying to tease you. I mean, I read that in print a lot,
Right.
And I just go, wow, and I'm at this point in my career where I was just nominated this year for an Eisner for Superman Lost. And that was the same creative team that was on Deathstroke, where we were also nominated, and the same editor, Brittany Holzer, who was Deathstroke editor and was Superman editor. And I figure if it was anybody else, they would have given them keys to the place by now. And I'm not even working at DC at the moment, so it's really kind of, I don't know what that's about, And then Brittany, I don't know, she earned DC a nomination for Wonder Woman. She earned them a nomination for Deathstroke. She earned them a nomination for Superman. Why doesn't she have keys to the place? So let me speak up for her. Let me speak up for, for her, for Tom, for, these other people. But it's just, it's just, I guess it's because we're legendary. I don't know what it is. There's something going on.
So, given that your body of work, is there any characters from any company that you would still like to work with in the future if given the chance, and they don't deem you legendary?
Well, I've said this a million times to a million people, and every time I've been asked this question, I say Batman and Iron Man. And every time they need a new Batman writer, they hire John Smith, and when they need a new Iron Man writer, they hire Smith John. So I don't know. They just launched a new Iron Man book. I hope it's successful. I don't know this person who's writing it, but I wish them all the best. But God damn it, I've been waiting. I feel like I've been waiting outside the Iron Man office for 30 years, going, when are you going to call me, guys? But yeah, those are two characters that I really get up in the morning for. But yeah, I think what it is, and someone tried to explain it to me, that my approach to writing is not everybody's cup of tea, because I'm so reality based. And so even my Superman book, it doesn't have the heightened reality that you would, excuse me. I think the best way to explain this is, it's like you have the CW shows like Supergirl or Legends of Tomorrow, and I'm more of a Netflix Daredevil guy. I'm more of a Frank Miller guy, and I don't know. I think that, is there a market for that? I don't know. I don't know that the mainstream comic companies particularly want that anymore. I really don't know. But or it could be my charming personality. Where
Well,
I'm,
I mean, let's parse that a little bit, because
Sure.
I've been reading your work for years, and I'm not trying to kiss your ass or anything, but I think it's at an higher intellectual level than your average writers. Like, you have to pay attention to your scripts, especially with the playing around with time frames and unstated character motivations, and that can be a turnoff for your average reader that just wants to read about Iron Man punching the Titanium Man again.
I get that a lot. You're hitting it right on the nail.
It's my roundabout way of saying I think you're too smart for your own good.
I really don't think I'm all that smart. I just go like, okay, I really like, if I was watching TV, okay, I don't really know what's on TV now, so I have to go, let's visit yesteryear. If I was watching TV, I would like Stephen Bochco. I would like, West Wing, Aaron Sorkin. I love his writing. Michael Mann, anything with Michael Mann, that kind of stuff. I'm always trying to, like in 1987, I wrote this comic book called Spider-Man versus Wolverine, which was a very grown-up take on Spider-Man. There's this moment where there's a sniper taking pot shots in Times Square. He's in Times Square with Mary Jane, and all of a sudden the sniper, he realizes there's somebody up there with a rifle, because the spider sense keeps going off and stopping and going off and stopping. And Peter dashes into the alley to change his clothes, to change into Spider-Man to go to the rescue. And while he's in the alley changing his clothes, the guy starts shooting. And Peter, now mind you, he's Spider-Man. He changes pretty quick. He's a pretty quick guy, but he's still not fast enough, because the guy has started shooting. So while he's changing his clothes, he's thinking how absurd it is that I choose to let people die so I could come in here and put on this carnival outfit before I go and help somebody. Okay. And that's the kind of thing that probably, a lot of, writers would not necessarily do. And which is not to put them down. It's just that this is how I think. And there's a handful of us. I think Tom King is another one of us who really takes a character, turns it inside out, and finds something completely new. Where it's just like, he could take this character that we haven't thought about in 20 years, and my God, he sets the world on fire with it. And I hate him. I hate you, Tom, because he's really that good. So I think it's that kind of thing that. That may or may not, be in vogue, but So I really don't. I don't expect anyone's going to be, giving me Iron Man anytime soon.
For what it's worth, I'd read your take on Daredevil in a heartbeat if it ever happened.
it would just be so close to Frank's. Don't you remember back in the, I don't know, you're so young. You look at both of you. You guys are teenagers. Back in my day, young man.
I was a year old when he started, began working with Marvel. So
okay.
I was born,
and I was working at Marvel when he began working at Marvel, when he was just this skinny kid and no one could remember his name, and he was wandering the hall with Denny, and Denny used to wander the halls. That's how Denny used to plot stories, by just walking around and wandering. And for a while, I thought a vagrant. I didn't know who he was. I thought somebody had let a vagrant into the office. So, a couple of days of this guy just wandering up and down the hall. And I turned to Larry and go, who is that? And Larry goes, You don't know who that is? And I went, no. And he goes, that's Denny O'Neil. And I was a huge Denny O'Neil fan.
Sure.
And Denny ultimately became one of my mentors. But Frank, he was pacing the hall with Denny and going to see these chop suey movies with Denny and so forth. But I remember reading Frank's Daredevil and just inhaling it. And it was one of those comics, and I feel like we're getting fewer of those these days, that you just inhale and and I would get to the last page of the comic, and first I'd be angry that we ran out of pages. And I go, because all of a sudden you turn the page and you see that letters page and you know it's over, and you're going, no, not the letters page. Oh, and I would get to the end of Frank's Daredevil and I'd put it down, and I would just go, and please excuse my language, but I put the comic book down and I just go, fuck. Because it was that good. It would just knock me out, and I don't write as well as Frank, but I could tell you every time I sit down to do a script, that's what I'm trying to do for you guys. I want you to get to page 20 or whatever it is of my story and just blurt out some expletive. I want you to be pissed off when you see that ad for whatever, at the end of the comic book and you realize the comic book is over. I want to give you your $5 worth. I'm always swinging for the fences. I don't always make it, but I'm always trying. And that's the type of, so if they gave me Daredevil, that's pretty much the Daredevil you'd get. But, again, I think I've been hanging out in the hall too long. I'm legendary. So there you go.
There it goes. Well, Chad, we've got time for one, maybe two more questions.
I'll keep it short. I promise.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's quite all right.
I'm a rambler. I ramble on. Sorry.
You make
I call it the weave. Because sorry.
Less questions. In your talking, you answered all my questions. So, but no, we've talked a lot about your part, in Vampirella. Who's the artist that you're working with, and kind of how did you guys get paired up?
Okay, so the regular Vampirella guy is a guy named Aragon Gunduz, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it because I'm never sure exactly how to pronounce it. So Aragon has a wonderful style that looks a lot like animation cells. So it's kind of like this is what a Vampirella, like Adult Swim, animated series might look like. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then he does amazing work with color, with airbrushing, with those kind of techniques. It's kind of unparalleled. It's unbelievably gorgeous. The Draculina story is being drawn by a young man named Ivan, and I can't remember Ivan's last name. I'm so sorry, Ivan. I have to look it up. And we're producing that directly from his pencils because it's just first of all, because it's the dark world and we want it to be dark. So it's so everything that takes place in the dark world is in black and white, which does not, you would think that would save Dynamite money, but actually it does not save them much money. But it's not a printer error. They're in the dark world. That's why it's black and white. We established that in issue 15 of Vampirella, of my Vampirella run, the first time we saw the dark world. So Ivan's work is being produced right from the pencils. And then Ergun will return. It will technically be issue 676, but Dynamite just announced that they will be renumbering the book. So we're going to keep the legacy numbering. We're going to keep the 676, but when Ergun returns with 676, it'll be issue number 1 of I believe it's volume 6 of Vampirella, and that kicks off the whole postpartum storyline. It's called The Long Night, and it's kind of a future shock story. There's a lot going on with that, and we can always come back and talk more about that. Ergun started turning in some of these pages and these character designs, and it's mind-blowing. Every time this guy comes back, he just gets better. It's just it's really, really gorgeous work. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, you've been privileged to work with some pretty legendary artists in your day. I mean, going back to Paul Smith. And then, of course, Mark Texeira on the Black Panther run and more, of course. That's just what immediately jumps off the top of my head. So to hear you speak so highly of your artists, I mean, that speaks volumes to me.
Yeah, I am always just tickled, because Ergun is Turkish. He does not speak English. We have an interpreter that we send our script to. And really, I think if Vampirella is any good at all, if my Vampirella is any good at all, it accounts as much to the interpreter as it does to the artist, because
Sure.
I'm always blown away that Ergun gets the nuances, the little facial. I write fairly dense scripts, but he gets all the little bits of business, because there's a lot of stuff in the story that the art needs to carry. So I don't have to stick a big caption, and tell you how the character's feeling. I want the picture. I want you to get that impact just from watching Vampirella cross the room and open a door or whatever the story is, and he nails it. He just nails it every time. It's just amazing how I don't really know how he does it, but yeah, he does great, just great work. The other guy that I worked with was on Superman Lost was Carlo Pagulayan, and he was my artist on Deathstroke. Carlo is another guy. He speaks English perfectly, though. He's but I send him the script and it comes back and it's just there's two kinds of artists. There's an artist who just will follow the script and do what you ask them to do, and then there's the artist who just particularly newer people who goes, I know more than this guy. I know. Oh, the old man has lost it. I know more than him. I'm gonna fix it. And then I can't tell what the hell is going on. And then I have to go and rewrite the pages. So now I'm writing the artist's story. Which sometimes works, but most of the time does not work. Because usually when I have to do that, it's because we ran out of time, and it's faster for the editor to ask me to go in and rewrite than to have this guy go back and redraw. But Pagulayan is a guy that just if you ever get a chance to do like a script to art comparison with Carlo's stuff, you'll see just how precisely this guy follows the script, and he does a wonderful job. By the way, I don't know if you guys are up for it, but I'd like to send you. We have something called the Vampler. The Vampler is like a 10-page primer on our Vampirella series. It's a PDF that I would like you to post everywhere that you could possibly post it, that people can download for free, and just so you can stop guessing. I don't want people to assume what the book is.
Sure.
Because that's what not killed, but that's what really harmed Deathstroke, is that people thought Deathstroke was about this, this bloody, book with a guy with a sword, and he's like the world's deadliest assassin, which was not what the book was about at all. Deathstroke was a book about the world's worst dad. Okay.
Yeah. And then
and a lot of people miss that because they look at the cover and they just skip it. And a lot of people are just skipping Vampirella because they think it's about, I don't know, the occult or sex or whatever like that. So, and they completely miss like the whole idea that it's about a single girl trying to make it in a big city. She just happens to be a vampire, So when we get done, I'm going to email that to Brad and do with it with you what you will. It's okay with Dynamite. It's okay with me. And I would like as many people as possible to just take a look at it, for free and get past the covers and all other stuff. And then you go, oh, now I get what this book is about. And you'll see that it's funny and it's poignant, and it makes you laugh and it makes you cry, and yes, she'll bite a few necks, but, don't take it personally.
Yeah. When we do an article for the website, I'll throw it up there with it.
Yeah.
God bless
with this interview.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a fantastic place to end it for the night. Thank you so much, Christopher Priest, for hanging out with us. The pleasure has been ours.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We'll have to have you back if you're up for it. We'll chat some more.
Oh, anytime.
Yeah, we didn't even get to talk about Milestone.
Oh yeah. Well, and there's a ton of stuff coming out in the next year. People will get sick of me in the next year or so. I've said yes to way too many things, so there'll be a bunch of stuff to talk about in the next year.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we will be happy to talk with you when the time is right again. So,
Good
well,
deal.
thank you all for listening. Our guest this week has been Christopher Priest. Don't call him legendary, though. Um, anyway, at the end of the day, he's Chad and I'm Matt, and we're the Comic Watchers. This is our show. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and even Blue Sky, and of course at the comic-watch.com website.
Threads.
Oh, and Threads. That's a new one on me. Okay.
Really?
It shouldn't be, but it is. Thank you all for listening. The world can be a crappy place, but it doesn't have to be. Take just a moment to put something good back into the world. Read some comics. Support your local comic shop. Be kind to a stranger. All that jazz. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Oh, no show next week because of Thanksgiving. So we'll see you in two.
Right.
Back.
And then,
oh, go ahead.
then in 2 weeks we're talking the Jimi Hendrix Purple Haze original graphic novel.
There you have it. Get your 60s on, baby.